we've arrived, walking up to the front porch now. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Nice to meet you, John Ferry.
I'm Brad.
Nice to finally meet you.
You too.
But those are the two skulls, right?
Yes,
You mind if I
yes.
come take a look?
Go ahead.
So it was a gift, right?
Yeah.
It was a gift and you had no idea. Did they know that it was real?
I'm assuming she did. I mean, it was marked dental skulls.
In the box.
Yeah.
These have all the indications of what would make a Clay Adams skull, which is good to know.
This is John Pichaya Ferry. He's 22 years old, and he didn't just make the 3-hour trip up from Brooklyn because he's really into bones, even though he is. This is a business trip. He runs a company called John's Bones, which sells human remains online. He runs the whole thing out of his apartment.
Welcome in.
Wow.
It's a collection of skeletons and pieces of medical history. This is a phantom skull. These are my 2 exploded skulls. Here's the spine wall.
Whoa, okay. Wow. How many are there here?
Over 100.
There's 100 spines in here.
127.
How much money is this entire collection worth right now?
$5,600,000.
$500,000 in here. Damn. What was the first bone you acquired? Do you have that still?
No, I let it go. I don't believe in hoarding.
You don't believe in hoarding?
So early on, I started with animal skeletons, but I started the business with $300 in my bank account. So the only way that I was really able to grow the business was by buying and selling.
How do you source the bones?
Almost 100% of the bones that we get are inherited. So we do not work with tribal skulls, we do not work with grave robbed skulls, or any type of skulls that are not educational and medical. For instance, I had someone whose father was a doctor in the 40s and they inherited the skeleton. So companies like us provide a service to help people that don't know what to do with these pieces. And I've unfortunately seen pieces end up in the trash and buried because people just didn't know what to do with it.
What can somebody buy on your website?
We try to make everything available, from individual bones to skulls to pathological skulls, all the way to full skeletons.
What's the most expensive thing you have on your site?
I think currently it's a full skeleton. I think it's selling for $7,200. I've seen some sales happen privately that can range over $40,000, $50,000.
Who are you selling to?
We try to sell to osteologists and educators that can stand to benefit from these pieces. Our goal is for these pieces to be used for education and respectfully, and we put it on our client to be able to follow that guideline.
You just have to trust that the client is going to abide by that.
Yes. We do our best to make sure that these pieces are preserved, but I also believe that everybody has the right to study osteology.
Up until the mid-20th century, osteology, or the study of bones, pretty much had to be done with actual bones. It was extremely common for medical students to be required to buy a personal box of human bones along with their textbooks in order to learn how the human body worked. But even now, the trade of human remains is still happening. With the exception of a few states, it is perfectly legal to buy or sell human bones. You can go to Amazon right now and add a human rib or fibula to your shopping cart. But most people who know about John Ferry aren't customers. They found him through TikTok, where he runs a mostly educational account, sharing his knowledge about bones to over 500,000 followers.
Waiting for cops to come, found some bones in my wall. Are they human? I don't...
No, they are not. This is what a real human vertebrae looks like. Ciao everyone, today we got a skull that came into the showroom that's in need of repair, so I wanted to take you through that process.
Do you think that everybody who is collecting bones is as into the education part as you are?
Well, I can't speak for what other people are doing currently within the industry, but here at John's Bones, we believe in educating and destigmatizing a stigmatized industry.
Why is it stigmatized?
Well, you know, when I was even doing animal skeletons, people would come up to me in my high school and be like, oh, you must be obsessed with death because you work with bones. And even look at crime shows. CSI, it's related to murder and death. So that's why we really want to paint it in an insightful and an educational manner, where it doesn't have to be creepy, dark, and scary, but could be something that can benefit humanity.
The question that people seem to ask me most often is, where do these bones come from?
It's a complex question because the medical bone trade spanned over 100 years. in 4 different continents. But the simplest response is the bones come from individuals who donated their bodies to medical science.
This is where things get tricky. A lot of the bones that John's Bones sells do have labels on them from well-known companies like Adam Ruley or Milliken & Lawley, companies that no longer exist or haven't sold real bones for decades, which means it's never going to be easy to figure out where they got the bones from. Professor Samuel Redman is a historian and anthropologist, and he studied the business of human remains. He says that the public's ethical concern about this stuff goes way back, but the solutions that companies had weren't so straightforward.
So there are some really interesting stories going back even to medical schools in the 19th century, where essentially they hired custodial staff to go out at night to the cemeteries, and somehow the remains almost would just sort of magically appear at the medical school.
I'm gonna just put the name on that. This is grave robbing.
Yes, yeah, without a doubt. But gradually you get to the point where people don't want that immediate connection, where it's easier, I would say, to buy these things through a catalog. And you sort of then can wipe away some of those ethical questions about, well, where are these remains coming from? Well, they're sourced from somewhere else. They're not coming from the local cemetery.
Where maybe it's my neighbor's grandpa.
Right.
So the medical students who were buying human remains, they're buying them from these reputable companies. Where were the companies getting the human remains from?
Sometimes people intentionally try to avoid telling you exactly where these remains came from. But in my estimation, a huge number of remains came from India. A huge number of remains later, I believe, start coming from China.
Is there any way for me to know that that skeleton is from somebody who consented to having their body used for scientific purposes?
The vast, vast majority of medical specimens are human remains of people who did not consent to be in that position. And that the origins of many of those remains in the 20th century are quite troubling. That they were taken from, exploited from graves either through a system of global colonialism or by virtue of the fact of their socioeconomic position. But my sense is that it's mostly being operated through this shadowy gray market where, again, there's this laundering aspect of what's going on, where the provenance of many of these remains is not exactly clear.
Do you feel like it's laundering?
From my point of view, yes.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think what we're talking about is the willful forgetting and in some ways an exploitative rendering of the past that selects the information that is beneficial or valuable to us doing the selling, let's say, and is information that pushes us away from understanding who that person really was.
At this point, there are very few companies that still sell human bones. And private collectors getting into the business means that prices for real bones have never been higher. So nowadays, universities and institutions tend to use replicas, which are cheaper and also mostly sidestep those murky ethical issues.
So he's putting together the skeleton of a newborn human. So we have skeletons of fetuses and newborn humans. We try to do it accurately and with precision and with respect, because these were people, so we need to do this with respect as well.
Even if these are copies?
Even if they're copies, they still came from a person.
Bone Clones is one of the biggest replica makers in the business. Michelle Tabenki is a research specialist here. She's also a professor of anthropology, and she says academics are still working through the ethics of all this.
We want to be able to create replicas so that the need and demand for a poached skeleton or a human skeleton would go down.
Is that where we're starting to have this conversation within your field about, hey, we need to start thinking about ethically, what are we doing here?
Precisely. It's more about taking a pause for a moment and understanding the collections that we're using, how they were amassed, how those people may have been treated, consent issues, things like that. How do we involve dissent communities? We are trying to move away from real human material. We are trying to give you casts of real humans that are coming from documented skeletal collections.
So these bones from actual humans, they're still out there. What should we do with them then?
I mean, sure. I haven't the slightest clue on how to address it. How do we stop it? How do we reduce the need? The only way that we can, at least, is by selling replicas.
And that's the thing. There's just no consensus on what to do with the potentially hundreds of thousands of sets of human remains that are floating around out there. So replicas may reduce the need for real bones, but the demand is definitely still there. John Ferry has recently moved his collection from his apartment to a commercial space in Bushwick, where interested visitors can come and look at the people who became part of medical history, and maybe buy part of one.
So this person was missing a mandible, and that probably just happened due to time and wear, but you can actually open it up to see the inner workings of the inside of the skull as well as the nasal canal.
Have you ever heard a coherent alternative to selling the bones?
The day I will is the day I'll stop selling. If you have the best replicas in the world, that doesn't deny the fact that these pieces exist in the world. Because you would still have to deal with what do you do with it problem. You've spent the day with me,
Yeah.
we talked, I've shared, what would you do? How would you deal with the bones?
I'll be really honest with you. I wouldn't want to be involved.
Right, but if you were.
I don't want to be involved.
Exactly. Well, I believe in doing something, right? It's like, I talk to people. Blitz round, you're me, what would you do? Bury them. Can't bury them. And you're also destroying thousands of pieces of history. Donate them. Okay, well, there's one natural science museum, major one in New York, but majority of states doesn't have enough resources. All right, give them back. Give them back to who? People love easy question, easy responses.
I don't think I would feel comfortable making a profit from human remains. That's where I am.
There needs to be a way to pay rent, and hopefully by doing so, I'm not living in a chateau, coming to my penthouse, driving my Lamborghini, but I just think we operate and function as any other, business. I see it as a highly stigmatized antique business. That really is everything that I wanted to encapsulate in the tour today, and I hope you guys appreciated it. Thank you. Of course. There we go.
I'm Michael Learmonth, editor-in-chief of Vice News. Too often, traditional news outlets shy away from the real stories and experiences of those living through global conflicts. Not Vice News. Our reporters are on the ground, fearlessly covering the human stories that shape our world. You and millions of others can continue to read, watch, and listen to Vice News for free. But we hope you'll consider making a one-time or ongoing contribution of any size at vice.com/contribute. Every contribution, no matter how big or small, helps support the journalism Vice News brings to you every day. Thank you.